By the time the townspeople started calling it the House of Mercy, the building on the hill had already learned how to keep its secrets. It sat just beyond the last neat row of clapboard homes in Fairbridge, Ohio, where the dirt road bent toward the railroad tracks and the fields opened into a soft, rolling horizon. From a distance, it looked exactly like what it claimed to be. A large, solemn brick house with white-trimmed windows, a bell over the front porch, and a painted sign that read, "Fairbridge Home for Orphaned Children." In the evenings, when the sun slid low behind the sycamores, its windows glowed with lamplight, and its chimneys exhaled thin threads of smoke against the orange sky. To anyone passing through town on a Sunday, it could have been a painting of Christian charity. This story is inspired by real 19th century practices in the United States, when so-called homes and private orphanages often sold or placed out children as labor across state lines, hiding exploitation behind the language of rescue and adoption. Names and details are changed, but the mechanisms you'll hear about, rail cars of children sent west, missing paperwork, and lives turned into ledger entries, come straight from documented history. In 1879, when the Fairbridge home first opened its doors, the town wanted to believe in it. Factories were creeping into the Ohio River Valley, chimneys rising over places that had once been nothing but corn and pasture. Railroads stitched the region to Chicago and St. Louis and beyond. With the New World came new problems: dead fathers in mill accidents, mothers lost to childbirth or fever, children wandering the streets with no shoes and no last names anyone cared to remember. Preachers thundered about sin and neglect. Newspaper columns lamented the orphan question. Everyone agreed something had to be done. The answer, it seemed, arrived in the form of a single man. Reverend Elias Harrow came to Fairbridge with a small carpetbag, a dangerous amount of charm, and a story that felt like an answered prayer. He preached his first sermon as a visiting minister in the summer of 1878, filling the whitewashed church with stories of abandoned children he had seen in the slums of Cincinnati and Pittsburgh. "They sleep in alleys," he told the congregation, voice soft and rough at once. "They steal because no one feeds them. They grow up without family, without faith, without hope. We cannot save the whole nation, but we can save a few. We can be, for them, what the Lord has been for us, a refuge." He did not shout. He didn't need to. By the time the collection plate went around, people were crying as they dropped coins into the brass bowl. Within a year, land had been donated on the hill, money pledged by mill owners and storekeepers alike, and itinerant bricklayers hired to raise the walls. Widows sewed curtains. Farmers brought wagon loads of lumber. The local ladies' society painted the sign that would hang out front, carefully forming each letter of the word orphaned, so no passerby could mistake the mission. Reverend Harrow stood at the center of it all like a conductor. He refused a salary at first, accepting only modest support in the form of food and a small room in the parsonage. When someone questioned how he could afford the growing list of expenses, coal, medicines, school books, he smiled with an almost embarrassed humility and said anonymous benefactors from the city had promised to help. "You would marvel," he told the town council, "at how many hearts soften when you show them a hungry child." The first children arrived that winter. They came on trains mostly, thin boys and girls stepping down from soot-streaked cars clutching carpetbags, or nothing at all. The station master would help gather them on the platform until Reverend Harrow appeared with a wagon, a wool scarf wrapped around his throat, and a stack of papers in his hand. "From the Cincinnati House of Industry," he would explain. "From the Columbus Asylum. From a flooded tenement where no parent survived." Sometimes he had letters. Sometimes only a note pinned to a collar with a first name and a year of birth. The people of Fairbridge watched these processions with a mixture of pity and pride. They saw how the children's eyes widened at the sight of open fields after crowded alleys, how they flinched at sudden noises, how they clung to each other as if separation meant erasure. They saw, too, how Reverend Harrow knelt to speak to each child at eye level before guiding them into the wagon. "He's a saint," Mrs. Forbes, the grocer's wife, said more than once, dabbing at her eyes with the corner of her apron. "An absolute saint." From the outside, the House of Mercy lived up to that reputation. On visiting days, church ladies would walk up the hill carrying baskets of biscuits and jars of preserves. They found children lined up in clean, if mended clothes. The dormitory beds were tightly made. The schoolroom smelled of chalk and ink. In the big dining hall, long tables were set with tin cups and bowls, ready for stew. The visitors saw what Reverend Harrow wanted them to see. A quiet girl, in a borrowed dress, reading scripture in a clear voice. A freckled boy reciting arithmetic tables while the others listened. Older children sewing or mending under the watchful eye of Miss Lydia Harrow, the Reverend's younger sister, whose severe bun and wire-rimmed spectacles did nothing to soften the impression of tireless devotion. The Harrows had thought of everything. They encouraged the children to call them uncle and aunt. They made sure that when visitors asked if the orphans were happy, little hands went up and polite voices answered yes. On Sundays, they brought a selected group of the best behaved into town to sit in the front pews, a living proof of what donations could do. Still, there were details that didn't fit the saintly picture. Small things too easy to ignore. The home was always almost full, but never overflowing, no matter how many new faces stepped off the trains. When Mrs. Forbes asked about two little sisters she had grown fond of, girls with identical braids and matching dimples, Miss Harrow smiled tightly and said they had been placed with a good family out west as part of the home's mission to find permanent Christian homes. "Isn't that wonderful?" she said. "They'll grow up on a farm with a mother and father of their own." Mrs. Forbes had nodded, but something about the speed of it had troubled her. The girls had arrived only a month before. There had been no mention from the pulpit of a pending placement, no farewell service, no chance for the town to send them off with knitted scarves and kisses on the forehead. The next Sunday, Reverend Harrow preached on the virtue of trusting God's timing and not clinging to earthly attachments. "Children are like seeds," he said, hands spread wide. "We plant them where they will grow best, even if it means we never see the harvest." People said, "Amen." The uneasy feeling slipped back beneath the surface. In the ledgers at the general store, another pattern quietly emerged. Thomas Ellery, who had taken over from his father as proprietor, noticed that the Harrows bought supplies in strange quantities. Flour, salt, and beans in bulk made sense. So did soap, candles, and bolts of cheap cloth. But every few months there was a purchase that stood out. 20 identical small shoes in different sizes, followed weeks later by no shoe purchases at all. Dozens of wool blankets ordered in October, then no more all winter. A crate of children's books that never seemed to appear on the shelves when church ladies visited. When he mentioned it to his wife, she shrugged. "They're running a home, Thomas," she said. "Children grow, some go. It's not like we know exactly how many they have at any moment." He let it drop. Business was good. The Reverend always paid in cash. The rail station, too, held pieces of a picture no one yet knew they were looking at. Porter Henry James could have told you that more children arrived in Fairbridge than seemed to stay. He could have told you that some weeks, when no trains brought new faces in, children nonetheless left, quietly in ones and twos, handed over to strangers who carried official-looking papers and avoided conversation. But Henry was a busy man, and the nation was moving west. People were always coming and going, and children on platforms were hardly new. The orphan trains sending city children to rural families had become a common sight by the 1880s. The idea that the Fairbridge home was simply participating in this movement didn't feel strange. It felt modern, efficient, kind. No one in town saw the arrangement for what it really was, because no one thought to put all the separate observations together. The late-night deliveries of coal, the sealed letters arriving from Chicago and St. Louis, the way Miss Harrow flinched, not much but enough, whenever someone joked that the house must sometimes feel like a business instead of a charity. Only one person in Fairbridge took note of all these things at once, and she didn't understand yet what they meant. She was 11 years old, her name was Anna Cobb, and on the day her story crossed paths with the house on the hill, she stood on the train platform with a small cloth bundle and a letter neither she nor anyone in town would ever see. For now, all she knew was that her mother was dead, her father had disappeared into the smoke of a steel mill accident, and that the woman in the gray dress waiting beside the Reverend had a smile that did not reach her eyes. "Welcome, child," Reverend Harrow said, extending his hand as if greeting a guest instead of receiving a life. "The Lord has brought you to a place of mercy." Behind him, the house on the hill watched with dark windows, its foundations deeper than anyone imagined. It had room for one more. By the spring of 1881, Anna Cobb had learned that the House of Mercy ran on 2 clocks. The first was the big brass one in the front hall, the one visitors saw as soon as they stepped through the door. Its hands moved with respectable, unhurried dignity. It chimed on the hour, calling children to meals and prayers. When local ladies came to tour the home, Reverend Harrow would tap its glass and say, "Order, you see." Children thrive on order. The second clock was the timetable nailed to the wall of the railroad depot down in town. It didn't chime. It hissed steam and screamed whistles, and demanded that people be in certain places at very precise times, or be left behind forever. The House of Mercy lived by that clock far more than anyone in Fairbridge realized. Anna figured this out on her 3rd week at the home, on a Wednesday morning that began like any other. The children had finished their porridge and lined up for inspection. Miss Harrow passed down the row, shoulders stiff, fingers checking collars and hair ribbons, straightening boys' suspenders, giving a rare, quick nod when something met her standards. "Hands out," she ordered. They obeyed. She glanced at palms, checking for dirt. Anna watched her eyes, sharp, restless, moving faster than her hands. Miss Harrow paused in front of a new girl, Little Ruth from Cincinnati, and gave her a thin smile. "You'll do," she said, quietly, as if to herself. "You're small for 8. That's useful." Useful for what? She didn't say. An hour later, Ruth was gone. It happened so quickly that if Anna hadn't been carrying towels past the office door at that exact moment, she might have missed it. Through the narrow crack, she saw Ruth standing between Reverend Harrow and a stranger in a dark overcoat. The man's hat was in his hands, his eyes calculating as they moved from Ruth's face to her shoulders, to her shoes. "Healthy stock," the man said. "The foreman likes them wiry. Less trouble with ladders." "Of course," Reverend Harrow answered. "You understand these children are placed out for their moral welfare as much as for work." "Work builds character," the man said with a shrug. "We're doing God's will in our own way." Papers changed hands. A folded letter, a list, a small envelope whose contents clinked softly. Coins. Anna's stomach twisted. She pressed herself flatter to the wall as Ruth's eyes flicked towards the door with a kind of animal panic, as if she could sense someone watching, but didn't dare move. "Say thank you, child," Miss Harrow said from somewhere out of sight. "The Lord has found you a home." "Thank you," Ruth whispered. By supper, her bunk was stripped and made up for someone else. When the other girls asked where Ruth had gone, Miss Harrow told them the same story she always did. "The Lord has blessed her with a family in Indiana," she said. "She will have a mother and father of her own now. We should rejoice for her." "Will we see her again?" a girl named Mabel asked. "In heaven, certainly," Miss Harrow replied. The girls laughed uncertainly, thinking it was a joke. Anna didn't laugh. She had grown up with a father who measured steel beams and counted every nail twice before he drove it. Numbers had always made sense to her. They behaved. They told the truth, if you listened. The numbers at the home didn't add up. On the blackboard in the schoolroom, Reverend Harrow had written the facts for visiting donors just last week. Currently caring for 47 children. Anna could count at least 30 in the girls' dormitory alone. There were more in the boys' wing, plus the older ones who worked mainly in the kitchen and the laundry. Yet it felt as if, every few days, a bunk changed occupants. A familiar face vanished. A new child arrived from a city whose name Anna only knew from maps in her geography book: Boston, Philadelphia, New York. Once, just before lights out, a girl whispered across the aisle, "My cousin went on one of the orphan trains. The lady said farmers would choose them like piglets. Is that what happens here?" "Quiet," another hissed. "If you talk like that, they'll send you first." The worst part was how carefully everything was arranged so that no one in town saw the pattern. When visitors came, it was always on announced days. Those days, the children chosen to be shown off, were not the same ones Anna saw slipping into wagons at dawn. The shy, the limping, the ones with accents or dark skin, that was who the home presented as proof of its Christian charity. The rest were managed like stock in a warehouse. Anna didn't have the words for it yet, but she felt it in small, mean ways. In the ledger Mrs. Klein kept for the kitchen, children's names were written in chalk under columns: protein, bread, dairy. When a child left, the name didn't get a farewell flourish. It was wiped away with a damp rag, replaced with another, as if nothing had changed. In Reverend Harrow's office, a thick book lay open on his desk whenever Anna passed with cleaning rags. She caught glimpses when his door stood ajar, rows of names, ages, dates, and beside them, destinations: Illinois, Kansas, Iowa. Sometimes just W for West, as if beyond the Mississippi the map didn't need details. There were other columns, too, headed with single letters that meant nothing to Anna at first. S, H, U. Once, when the Reverend stepped out to speak to a caller, she saw one line filled all the way across. Cobb, Anna, 11, O, S+, H+. U? She jerked away as if burned. S for strength? H for health? U for usefulness? What did the question mark mean? That he hadn't decided yet whether she was worth more kept or sent away. That night, lying awake while the other girls snored softly around her, Anna listened to the building. Old houses made noises. She knew that. Her father used to say, buildings talked to the men who worked on them. You just had to learn the language of settling beams, wind in eaves, frost in brick. The House of Mercy had another language layered on top. Floorboards groaned with heavy steps after midnight. Not just the light tread of Miss Harrow doing her rounds. Doors opened and closed with muffled clicks in parts of the building visitors never saw. Once, she heard the distant clank of metal bars, a sound that didn't belong in a place meant for children. On the far side of the thin dormitory wall, the older girls whispered about what lay below the main floor. "There's a cellar," one said. "I saw the door when I was sent to the coal shed." "There are 2 cellars," another corrected. "The one for coal, and the one Uncle Harrow keeps locked." "Maybe that's where the food is," Mabel suggested. "Maybe that's where the children go before the trains," someone else said. "Stop it," hissed a voice from the dark. "He'll hear you." He always seemed to hear. That was the unsettling thing. The next afternoon, as if to prove the point, Reverend Harrow appeared in the schoolroom just as Anna finished copying sentences from a McGuffey reader. His shadow fell across her desk before she realized he was there. "Miss Cobb," he said pleasantly, "would you step into my office, please?" The other children went still. Being summoned alone to the office was rare. Sometimes it meant a reward, extra pie, a donated dress. More often it meant questions. Anna wiped her ink-stained fingers on her apron and followed him down the corridor. The hallway doors were closed, muting the sounds of recitation and sweeping. In his office, the air smelled of pipe tobacco and paper. "Sit," he said, gesturing to a chair. On the desk lay the ledger she had glimpsed before, open to a page she couldn't quite see. Beside it sat a neat stack of letters bound with string. "You've been with us nearly a month now," he began. "How are you finding life in the home?" Anna kept her back straight. "We have food and a place to sleep," she said carefully. "That is, better than some had." He smiled. "Very diplomatic. You're a thoughtful girl, Anna. Thoughtful children notice things other children don't." The words were gentle. The message underneath was not. "I need to know something," he continued, folding his hands. "Have any of the girls spoken to you about our placement work? About the way we send children to families in other states?" She hesitated. An answer that was too eager would make her look guilty. Too slow would look like defiance. "They say some go west on trains," she admitted. "That they get farms? That's what you preach on Sundays?" "Yes." His eyes held hers steadily. "That is what we do. We find homes for those the world has cast aside. But gossip corrupts even good works. People twist the truth into frightening shapes. I would hate for you to be frightened by something beautiful." "Why are we not told more?" she asked before she could stop herself. "We never get letters. No one ever comes back to visit." A shadow moved behind his gaze. For an instant she saw something hard there, like iron under velvet. Attachment can be dangerous in a place like this, he said softly. If we encouraged you to cling to those who leave, your hearts would break over and over. Better to look forward to where the Lord will send you, rather than back at those he has already placed. He leaned forward. You are not here to stay, Anna. None of you are. You are here to be made fit for a home. That is my calling. Do you understand? She nodded, though what she understood was different from what he wanted. Good. He closed the ledger with a soft thump. Then you also understand why it would be harmful, for you and for the others, if anyone started imagining wickedness where there is only sacrifice. Stories spread. Stories wound. We must be very careful with the stories we tell, mustn't we? It was a warning disguised as a lesson. Yes, Reverend, she whispered. He released her with a blessing and a touch on the head, the way he did for the younger children. As she stepped back into the hallway, she caught sight of the ledger's spine. In gold letters on the dark leather it read, Placements and Accounts. 2 words that didn't belong together. That evening, the second clock called again. Anna was helping peel potatoes in the kitchen when the distant whistle of the late train drifted up the hill. The cook, Mrs. Klein, paused with her hands deep in dough and frowned at the square wooden clock nailed near the pantry door. Another one this week, she muttered. That makes 3. 3 what? Anna asked too quickly. Mrs. Klein glanced at her, then at the doorway, as if measuring how far her voice might travel. Deliveries, she said in a low tone, or pickups. I don't ask which. Her eyes hardened for a heartbeat. And neither should you, if you want to sleep at night. But Anna knew herself well enough to realize that sleep and silence had never been friends in her mind. Somewhere between the ticking in the hall and the screaming whistle down in town, a question had rooted itself too deeply to pull out. How many children came to the House of Mercy, and how many ever truly went to homes? The first time Anna saw what lay beneath the House of Mercy, it was by accident. The second time, it was because she decided accidents weren't enough anymore. It started with a broken jar. On a wet Tuesday afternoon, Mrs. Klein sent Anna to the back pantry for more preserves. The hallway that led there was quieter than the rest of the home, its wooden floorboards worn smooth by decades of feet, carrying coal, potatoes, and secrets. At the end of the corridor, a narrow door opened onto the outside steps, down to the root cellar. Mind your footing, Mrs. Klein called after her. Rain makes those stones slick. I've no time to bandage you if you go tumbling. Anna nodded and slipped out, hugging the shawl around her shoulders against the chill. The wind smelled of damp earth and coal smoke. The sky hung low, the kind of heavy gray that made the world feel closer and smaller. The cellar steps were exactly as Mrs. Klein had warned, slick and uneven. Anna took them carefully, jar crate held tight in her arms. Halfway down, her foot slid on a patch of moss. The crate tilted. Glass clinked. One jar slipped free and smashed on the stone, spraying sticky plum preserves and glittering shards across the step. The sound was sharp enough to wake echoes. Anna's heart leaped into her throat. She dropped to her knees, instinctively reaching to gather the pieces before anyone could blame her for waste. As she did, she noticed something she had never really seen before. The cellar door at the bottom of the steps wasn't alone. To the left, almost hidden behind a sagging stack of firewood and a coil of rope, was a second door. This one sat deeper in the stone wall, lower to the ground, like an afterthought or an appendage. It was smaller, made of thick planks darkened by age and moisture. Rust bloomed around the iron hinges like old blood. And unlike the regular cellar door, which was secured with a simple latch, this one was held shut by 2 heavy padlocks and a chain looped 3 times around the handle. Anna stared, hands sticky with jam, breath forming small clouds in the cool air. Mrs. Klein had told the girls there were 2 cellars. Coal and storage, she'd said. Nothing more. But coal didn't need chains. Potatoes didn't scream in the night. Anna looked back up the stairs. No one stood at the top. The rain drummed softly on the yard outside. Somewhere in the distance, a train whistle wailed. She wiped her hands on her apron, gathered the largest glass shards into the broken crate, and forced herself to turn away from the locked door. Curiosity was dangerous here. She knew that. So was being caught in the wrong place, with the wrong expression on her face. But as she climbed the steps, that second door lodged itself in her mind like a splinter. That night, the girls in the dormitory talked in whispers about the new boy who had arrived at supper time. A small, dark-eyed child from St. Louis who never let go of his cap. Anna listened with only half an ear. Her thoughts kept circling back to those padlocks. "Anna?" Mabel hissed from the next bunk. "You're quiet. Are you sick?" "No," Anna whispered back. "Just thinking." "About what?" She hesitated. Telling the wrong person the wrong thing could send you west faster than any train. But she trusted Mabel more than most. Mabel was the sort of girl who asked questions under her breath and then made jokes loud enough to cover them. "About the second cellar door," Anna said. "The one with chains." Mabel went still. "You saw it?" "I tripped on the steps," Anna explained. "I dropped a jar. It's real. 2 locks. Heavy ones." In the dark, she heard Mabel swallow. "I heard them once," Mabel murmured. "From under the floor, crying. Miss Harrow said it was the pipes." "The pipes?" Anna repeated. "Yes. She said sometimes the wind makes them moan." Mabel shifted, blankets rustling. "But the wind doesn't call for help." The dormitory creaked and sighed around them, the bones of the house protesting another damp night. Somewhere in the walls, mice scratched. Down the hill, far away, wheels clattered on rails. "Maybe we're wrong," Mabel said after a while, voice so soft it was almost just breath. "Maybe it's only storage." Anna stared up into the darkness above her bunk. "And maybe," she answered, "that's what they count on us saying." The chance to test that dangerous thought came sooner than she expected. 2 days later, Reverend Harrow announced a special visiting Sunday. A group of important benefactors from Chicago would be attending service and touring the home. Everything had to be perfect. "We will show them what Christian industry can accomplish," he told the assembled children in the dining hall. "Hard work, clean habits, grateful hearts. Remember, generosity flows where it sees results." The next 48 hours turned into a scrubbed raw blur. Floors were washed until the boards squeaked. Windows were polished. The girls' dormitory smelled of lye and damp wool as blankets were beaten and mattresses turned. Anna's hands ached from wringing out rags. But preparations also brought opportunity. On Saturday afternoon, while most of the staff focused on the parlors and front hall, Mrs. Klein sent Anna and Mabel to fetch extra crockery from the cellar. "Mind you bring me the good plates," the cook said, shoving a lantern into Anna's hand. "The ones without chips." The Reverend doesn't want our guests thinking we feed children like dock workers." As soon as the kitchen door swung shut behind them, Anna's pulse quickened. She met Mabel's eyes in the dim hallway. "The second door," Mabel whispered. "We only look," Anna said. "If it's just storage, we know. If it's not—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. They descended the outside steps carefully, the lantern flame wobbling with each jolt. At the regular cellar door, Anna stopped, lifted the latch, and pushed it open just enough for Mabel to slip inside. "Count 10 and make noise," Anna said. "Rattle jars. If anyone comes, shout that you dropped something." Mabel nodded, eyes wide, then disappeared into the cool dark. Anna set the lantern on the ground so its light fell across the stone wall. The second door looked even heavier up close. The chain around it was thick, the padlocks dull with age but solid. Scratches gouged the wood near the handle, some deep, as if made by something hard and desperate. Or someone. She reached out, fingers trembling, and rested her hand on the chain. It was cold enough to burn. For a moment she did nothing, listening. The ordinary cellar sounds floated from within. Mabel shifting boxes, the clink of crockery. Beyond that, there was only the muffled drip of water, the distant murmur of the house above. Then, beneath it all, so faint, she almost thought she imagined it, came another sound. A cough, small, raw, followed by a hoarse whisper that might have been a word. Anna's heart slammed against her ribs. She leaned closer until her ear almost touched the wood. "Hello?" she whispered. "Is someone there?" Silence, then a scuffle, like bare feet on stone. "Please," a thin voice breathed. "Please, are you a new girl?" The question was so strange it took Anna a second to understand it. "Yes," she answered, throat tight. "My name is Anna. Who are you?" There was a pause. She pictured a child on the other side, deciding whether names were safe things to give. "Liza," the voice said at last. "I think I'm 11. Maybe 12 now. I don't know." "How long have you been here?" Anna asked. A small sob escaped. "Since snow. Before Christmas. They said I was bad stock. They said the family didn't want me after all." The phrase slammed into Anna like a bucket of ice water. Bad stock. Useful. Healthy. All the words she'd heard adults use for things that weren't people. She swallowed hard. Her fingers tightened on the chain until her nails hurt. "Liza, listen," she whispered. "I can't open this. Not now. But I've heard the trains. I've seen children leave. I think something is terribly wrong in this house." On the other side, Liza let out a dry, humorless laugh that sounded far too old. "I knew that when they locked us down here," she said. "How many are you?" "Upstairs. Dozens." Anna lowered her voice further. "How many are you?" The answer came so quietly, she barely caught it. 17. Mabel's voice cut across the air from the open cellar door. "Anna?" she called, louder than necessary. "Did you find the plates? Mrs. Klein will skin us if we're slow." Anna jerked back, nearly upsetting the lantern. She forced her voice to sound casual. "Coming," she answered. Then, closer to the door, she whispered, "I'll come back. I swear it. I won't forget you." "Hurry," Liza breathed. "They don't like new girls wandering." Anna snatched up the lantern and ducked into the regular cellar, heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her fingertips. Mabel stared at her from between two stacks of crates, arms full of plates. "Well?" Mabel hissed. "Is it—" "There are children," Anna said. The words tasted unreal even as she spoke them. "Locked. 17. Mabel almost dropped the plates. 17? Keep your voice down, Anna snapped, then immediately regretted the sharpness. Fear was making her brittle. Yes, there's at least one. Her name is Liza. She's been here since winter. Why would they keep children down there? Mabel whispered. We're already crammed up here. Anna thought of Ruth, of the boy with the cap, of all the faces that had vanished with no letters, no goodbyes. Her stomach twisted. I think, she said slowly, they're the ones who don't sell. The word hung between them like smoke. Sell. It was one thing to suspect, another to speak it aloud. On the walk back up the hill with the plates and the lantern, the world looked different. The House of Mercy, with its neat brick lines and white windows, now seemed to Anna like a mask pulled tight over something monstrous. You are not here to stay, Reverend Harrow had told her. Up until now, that had meant a future she couldn't picture, a farm somewhere, a nameless couple, a new beginning. But if some children didn't go anywhere at all, if some were simply shoved downstairs and forgotten when no buyer took them, then the home was not a bridge to a better life. It was a sorting machine. That night, sleep felt impossible. Questions pressed in from all sides. Who else knew about Liza and the 17? Did Mrs. Klein suspect more than she admitted? Did Miss Harrow hear the cries and lie to herself about pipes and wind? Did anyone in town have the slightest idea that while they knitted mittens and baked pies for the poor orphans, a second, hidden population shivered beneath their charity? At some point, near dawn, Anna made a decision that scared her more than the dark cellar. She would have to tell someone outside the house. Telling another child was one thing. Children had no power. They were the ones counted, moved, erased. Telling an adult meant a chance at real change, or at least at making the truth exist somewhere beyond her own head. It also meant, if she chose wrong, that Reverend Harrow would know exactly who had broken his rule about stories. She lay there, listening to the house breathe and crack, weighing names. The mayor? Too friendly with Harrow? The mill owner who chaired the homes board? He liked numbers and neat reports, not messy accusations from an 11-year-old girl. Then, through the fog of exhaustion, another face surfaced. Dr. Fenwick, the town physician. He came rarely, but when he did, he always smelled of carbolic and pipe smoke, and asked the children questions with a kind of distracted gentleness that felt real. He also once argued with Reverend Harrow in the hallway, where they thought no one could hear. Anna had been mopping then, the bucket squeaking on the boards. She remembered the doctor's voice, low and tight. You can't overcrowd them like this, he'd said. You're one epidemic away from a graveyard. The Lord protects his children, Harrow had replied, and our donors do not appreciate complaints. You're not running a factory, Fenwick had snapped. You're running a home, or so you say. It wasn't much, but it was something. By breakfast, a fragile plan had taken shape. The doctor was due to make his monthly visit that week. If she could catch him alone, even for a minute, she could tell him about the chained door and the voice called Liza. And if she couldn't, Anna glanced toward the hilltop windows as the bell rang and the children shuffled toward the dining hall. If she couldn't, the 17 children under her feet would stay nothing more than faint sounds in the stone. Stories that never got told. Dr. Fenwick arrived on a Thursday, as he always did, with his black bag, his tired eyes, and his habit of looking at people instead of past them. The House of Mercy staged itself for him. Beds were made tighter than usual. The sickest children got extra broth, so their cheeks looked less hollow. Those with bruises were sent to the laundry or the yard, so as not to trouble the doctor, as Miss Harrow put it. Anna knew better. They weren't protecting him. They were protecting the story. She waited all morning for a chance to speak to him alone. Fenwick moved from dormitory to schoolroom, listening to chests, peering at throats, murmuring instructions about boiling water and fresh vegetables. Each time Anna caught a glimpse of him, Reverend Harrow or Miss Lydia hovered nearby like shadows. It wasn't until the afternoon that the opening finally came. Rain had begun to tap at the windows again, turning the world outside to a gray blur. Anna was in the laundry, elbows deep in soapy water, when she heard Fenwick's voice through the half-open door that led to the yard. "No, Reverend, lice are not a sign of moral failing," he was saying sharply. "They're a sign you've packed too many heads under the same blanket." Her heart kicked. She crept closer. Through the crack, she saw him under the porch overhang, hat in hand, facing Reverend Harrow. The Reverend's posture was polite, but his jaw worked. "I warned you last month," Fenwick went on. "One case of measles in these conditions, and you'll be digging rows of little graves." "We do what we can with the resources we have," Harrow replied. "Would you have me turn children away to the streets?" "I'd have you take fewer and keep them alive," Fenwick snapped. "You don't run a rescue by piling bodies on top of each other and praying the Lord sorts them out." That was enough. Here was an adult already angry, already seeing cracks. If anyone would listen, it was him. Anna slipped out the side door and hurried around the corner, ankle twinging. Fenwick had just turned toward the gate, his bag swinging at his side. "Doctor!" she called, louder than she intended. Both men turned. Harrow's brows rose. Fenwick paused. "Miss Cobb," the Reverend said in his mild, warning tone. "What is it?" Anna met the doctor's eyes, then deliberately glanced down the hill toward town. A wordless plea. "It's my ankle, sir," she said quickly. "I slipped on the cellar steps. Mrs. Klein said not to bother you, but it's getting worse." Fenwick's gaze dropped to her boots. "Ankles can be tricky," he said. "Let's have a look. Somewhere we're not in the way." Harrow hesitated. "The kitchen is crowded. Take the side path," he said at last. "I'll see to the evening chores." On the stone path beside the house, under a bare lilac bush, Fenwick set his bag down and gestured for her to sit. "Up we go," he said, kneeling. "Twisted on the cellar steps, you say?" As soon as his fingers touched the leather of her boot, Anna spoke. "Doctor, there are children locked under the house." He froze. Slowly, he looked up. Rain pattered on the porch roof. Inside, dishes clinked. Out here, the air felt very thin. "Say that again," he said, quietly. "There's a second cellar door," she whispered. "Chained. I heard a girl through it. Her name is Liza. She says she's been down there since before Christmas. She says there are 17. Fenwick studied her face like a wound. He wasn't sure how deep ran. "Children imagine things," he began. But there was no weight behind it. "Pipes don't say their names," Anna said. "Wind doesn't tell you how long it's been there." He let out a long breath. "Who else knows?" "Mabel. No one else." He glanced back at the house. A curtain twitched in an upper window. "I'm the town physician, not the sheriff," he murmured. "I can't go breaking doors alone, but I can report what you've told me. I can insist on an inspection." "Will they listen?" she asked. "That depends on how much people like their illusions," he said. "But Sheriff Caldwell is not a man who ignores children in chains." He pulled a small notebook from his bag and scribbled quickly. "I'll see him tonight. In the meantime, you must do something very difficult." "What?" "Nothing," Fenwick said. "Tell no one else. Don't go near that door. If Harrow suspects, he'll hide whatever he can, and he'll make you the villain." "And the children underneath?" Anna's voice cracked. "They don't have time for nothing. If we charge in without proof, he'll call you hysterical and me jealous," the doctor said. "We'll lose any chance to help them. Let me bring the sheriff." He snapped the notebook shut and patted her shoulder. "Stay off that ankle," he said louder. "Try not to fall where there are no witnesses next time." He walked back toward the porch. Harrow held the door for him, face composed. "Everything in order?" the Reverend asked. "For now," Fenwick answered. "We'll speak again soon." 2 days crawled past. Every creak in the hallway made Anna think of a sheriff's boot. Every late-night step on the stairs made her imagine Harrow going down to the chained door with a lantern to silence Liza forever. When she pressed her ear to the dormitory floor, sometimes she thought she heard coughing. Sometimes she heard nothing. The silence felt worse. On the 3rd morning, the sheriff came. He didn't sneak. Caldwell rode up the hill on his chestnut mare, deputy at his side, rifle in its scabbard. Behind them walked Pastor Green and Thomas Ellery from the general store. Their faces were tight. Children crowded the windows. In the yard, boys stopped shoveling. Reverend Harrow went to meet them, smile fixed in place. "Sheriff," he called. "What a pleasant—" "We're here on business," Caldwell said, swinging down from the saddle. "Dr. Fenwick has raised serious concerns. We're going to see your cellars." "Cellars?" Harrow echoed. "You could have sent word." "I would have—" "That's why we didn't," Ellery said quietly. "This is a house of mercy," Harrow insisted. "You think I would harm children?" "I think we're going to see both doors," Caldwell replied. "Then we'll talk." Harrow led them around to the back. Anna and Mabel slipped into the laundry and cracked open the small side window, hearts hammering. At the first cellar door, Harrow gestured with the lantern. "Coal. Potatoes. Nothing sinister." "Other one," Caldwell said. "The old storm shelter is unsafe," Harrow protested. "We don't use it. The children aren't allowed near it." The deputy eyed the heavy chain. "Funny way to ignore a room," he said. "Keys, Reverend." For a heartbeat, Harrow didn't move. Then, with a tight jaw, he took a ring of keys from his pocket. "You're making a spectacle of Charity," he muttered. Caldwell said nothing. He snapped one lock open, then another. The chain slid away with a scrape. When he pulled the door, a wave of foul air rolled out, damp, waste, sickness. Even from the laundry window, Anna smelled it. "Lantern," Caldwell ordered. Harrow handed it over. The sheriff stepped inside. For a moment he vanished from view. Then his voice came, rougher than before. "Children," he called. "You can come to the light now. You're safe." There was a rustle, the clink of chains. The deputy emerged, guiding a small girl up the steps. She was all sharp bones and huge eyes, an iron hoop around one ankle. Anna knew her without an introduction. Liza. Their gazes locked across the yard. "You came back," Liza croaked. Anna nodded, throat too tight to answer. One by one, more children appeared, boys and girls of different ages and colors, blinking against daylight. Some coughed. Some shielded their faces with filthy hands. Together they looked like ghosts forced out of the ground. Pastor Green's hand flew to his mouth. Ellery swore. Fenwick's eyes burned. Caldwell turned on Harrow. "You call this mercy?" "They were ill," Harrow said quickly. "Difficult cases. I separated them for their own good, until we could find a buyer who'd take them anyway?" Ellery spat. "And the ones nobody wanted you just buried alive?" Harrow's face twisted. "You have no idea what it costs to feed so many mouths. Without placements, the home could not—" "Placements?" Fenwick cut in. "Is that what you call selling children by weight?" For the first time, Harrow's composure cracked completely. "You think food, roofs, and scripture are free?" he shouted. "The cities drown in abandoned children. We save as many as we can. Better a hard life in Kansas or Iowa than dead in a gutter." "And those?" Caldwell pointed at the cellar children, shivering in the yard. "What life did they get? What gospel?" Harrow had no answer. Behind him, the brick walls of the House of Mercy glowed dull under the gray sky. For years they had hidden everything that didn't fit the tale told in sermons and donor letters. Now a different story was spilling out onto the mud, written in iron and bare feet. As the deputy began to remove the shackles, as blankets were fetched and water brought, Anna felt Mabel's grip on her arm. "Are they like us?" Mabel whispered. "They are us," Anna said. "They're what we become when we disappear." She knew the battle was far from over. Harrow would still have friends in town, people who preferred the old picture and the simple word orphanage to the uglier ones, now forcing their way into the light. There would be meetings, arguments, maybe even trials, but something irreversible had happened. The second cellar door was open. The ledger Reverend Harrow kept so carefully no longer belonged only to him. Other hands were writing in other books now, sheriff's reports, medical notes, newspaper drafts. And somewhere on those pages, whether anyone liked it or not, would be the line that changed everything. 17 children, found chained beneath the House of Mercy, discovered after testimony from one of the home's own girls. Fairbridge fell strangely quiet in the days after the cellar was opened, as if the town itself were holding its breath. The children from underground were moved into the infirmary and the boys' old washroom, anywhere there was space out of the cold. Dr. Fenwick came every day now, sleeves rolled, hands raw from scrubbing. Miss Harrow drifted through the halls like a ghost, hair coming loose from its bun, spectacles askew. Mrs. Klein cooked and cooked, as if enough stew might erase the sight of iron rings in stone. Reverend Harrow did not preach the following Sunday. Pastor Green took the pulpit instead, voice shaking as he read from the gospel about millstones and those who harm the little ones. Some families sat stiff-backed, arms folded, eyes hard. Others wept openly. A few chairs were conspicuously empty. The mill owner, the banker, several board members of the home. In the House of Mercy, the clocks still ticked. The timetable at the station still listed trains east and west. But for the first time, the flow of children in one direction had stopped. No wagons left the yard. Formal charges came next. Sheriff Caldwell, who had spent his career chasing drunks and livestock thieves, suddenly found himself at the center of a case that reached far beyond his usual jurisdiction. With Fenwick's records, Ellery's ledgers, and the children's testimonies, he drew up a list of accusations that barely fit on the page: unlawful imprisonment, neglect, fraud, assault. Will they hang him? Mabel whispered in the dormitory, knees pulled up under her chin. Anna thought of Harrow's face when the cellar door swung open, how quickly his righteousness had turned to fury. I don't know, she said. I don't even know if they'll believe everything once lawyers start talking. Because that was the next shock. Lawyers came. A week after the discovery, a pair of men from Columbus arrived in stiff coats and polished boots, smelling of ink and travel. They were not there for the children. They were there for the reputation of institutions far larger than the house on the hill. You have done admirable work, Reverend, one of them told Harrow within earshot of the staff. Mistakes were made, certainly, but no one benefits if donors lose faith in private charity. We must handle this delicately. Delicately, Anna realized, meant slowly. It meant meetings in back rooms, stacks of paper, arguments about words while children coughed in makeshift beds. The first hearing was held in the town hall, a whitewashed building that had previously hosted quilting bees and harvest dances. Now its benches were crammed with townspeople, reporters from Cincinnati and Columbus, and more lawyers than Fairbridge had ever seen at once. Anna did not sit with the spectators. Sheriff Caldwell insisted key child witnesses be kept together in a side room until needed, away from the pointed fingers and whispered judgments. You're not on trial, he told them gruffly. He is. It didn't feel that way when Anna was finally called. She stepped up onto the little wooden platform, the Bible weightless in her hand, as she swore to tell the truth. Harrow sat at a table below, hands folded, hair neatly combed. He looked smaller than she remembered, but his eyes were as sharp as ever. State your name, the judge said. Anna Cobb. How long were you resident at the Fairbridge home? 3 months, sir. She told them about the trains, the disappearing children, the ledger on Harrow's desk, with columns that treated lives like tallies. She described the second cellar door, the chains, the voice that whispered her name from the dark. She told them about Liza. The prosecutor nodded, guiding her gently. The judge listened. Some people in the crowd gasped softly at certain details. Then Harrow's lawyer stood up. He had a voice like velvet and a way of smiling that never reached his eyes. Miss Cobb, he began, you are 11 years old. Yes, sir. An impressionable age. Would you say you are easily frightened? I don't know, she said. Sometimes I'm frightened when I should be. A few people laughed. The lawyer did not. You admit you were once an orphan, sleeping on city streets? Yes. Is it possible, Miss Cobb, that your imagination, shaped by hardship and hunger, might make things seem worse than they are? Cellars darker, chains heavier. In that moment, she understood exactly what Dr. Fenwick had warned her about. They would not attack the facts. They would attack the girl telling them. I didn't imagine the smell, she said steadily, or the iron on Liza's ankle, or the 17 names the sheriff wrote down when he took them out, one by one. She glanced toward Caldwell. He gave the smallest nod. The lawyer shifted tactics. Reverend Harrow has devoted his life to saving children no one else wanted, he said. Do you think he hates children, Miss Cobb? She thought of Harrow's sermons, his gentle hand on small heads, the way he had spoken about placements, like seeds blown by God's wind. She also thought of the ledger that paired those words with dollar amounts. I think he loves order more than he loves us, she answered. A murmur rippled through the hall. In the end, the hearing did not produce the kind of verdict storybooks promise. Harrow was removed from the home and charged, but powerful friends ensured the trial was moved to a higher court in the city, where proceedings dragged on for months. Some charges stuck. Others evaporated into legal smoke. He did not hang. He did, however, lose the House of Mercy. The building was placed under new management, this time a board that included Sheriff Caldwell, Dr. Fenwick, and 2 women from a regional reform society, who arrived with boxes of pamphlets about standards and oversight. The chain on the second cellar door was removed and melted down. The underground rooms were opened to light, scrubbed with lye, and eventually bricked up. "It's a start," Fenwick said, watching the workmen haul away the last of the iron rings. "Not enough, but a start." The hidden children slowly became simply children again. Some were reunited with families who had never stopped searching. Others were sent, not sold, to properly vetted homes, with real records and follow-up visits. A few, like Liza, were too old and too wary to trust the idea of adoption. They stayed at the home, not as inmates, but as staff in training. "What will you do?" Anna asked her once, months later, as they watched a class of younger children reciting their letters in a sunlit schoolroom. "Learn the books," Liza said, nodding toward the office. "The real ones. Make sure no one turns them into cages again." "And you?" she added, tilting her head. Anna looked down at her hands, now ink-stained instead of raw from scrubbing. She had begun helping Pastor Green copy records for a new thing the reform ladies insisted on: a centralized register of every child who passed through the home, where they went, and who checked on them later. "I don't know yet," Anna admitted. "But whatever it is, I think it will have paper in it." Years passed. The story of the house on the hill became a warning in reports and meetings, an example of what could happen when charity had no oversight, when placements were just another word for cheap labor. Laws changed slowly. States began to require licenses for homes. Inspectors appeared, not just friendly pastors and donors, but officials with checklists and the authority to shut places down. Fairbridge itself changed too. People still argued, still chose not to see certain things when it suited them, but there were more questions now whenever a wagon full of children rolled into town. More eyes watching ledgers. As for Anna, she did end up with a life filled with paper. She grew up, left the home, and eventually worked for a state office in Columbus that tracked orphanages, boarding houses, and what the new laws called child-placing agencies. Whenever a file crossed her desk, she thought of the columns in Reverend Harrow's ledger and of 17 names written by the sheriff's careful hand. Sometimes late at night, when the office halls were empty and only her lamp burned, she would open a drawer and pull out an old sheet of paper she kept hidden there. On it, in a 12-year-old's uneven script, was the first list she had ever made. Ruth, sent away Liza, cellar 17, unknown. Next to each name now, in smaller, neater writing, she had added what she knew. Ruth, located in Indiana, married, 3 children. Liza, supervisor, Fairbridge home. 17, accounted for, though some entries ended with a simple word, deceased. The House of Mercy still stood on the hill in Fairbridge, its bricks weathered, its windows reflecting new generations of children playing in the yard. To the casual eye, it looked peaceful, ordinary. That was the danger Anna knew. Monsters rarely kept fangs on the outside. This story, like the one that inspired it, is built from many real patterns in American history. Private homes that sold children as labor, orphan trains that turned lives into cargo, institutions that hid neglect behind religious language. Names have changed, details have been altered, but somewhere, in some ledger in some forgotten office, numbers like the ones Anna saw really were written. The difference now is that more people are willing to read them, and to ask, as she did all those years ago, the one question that finally cracked the story open. How many children go in? And how many ever truly come out?